All right, kids, it's time for our very first video on International Business Machines, better known as IBM.
I guess we've talked about IBM a lot in various ways, but this is kind of IBM's official video.
Yeah, we're going to give this one to IBM. This is IBM's official video, but we have some other great companies that we're going to talk about at the end of the video, so make sure you stay tuned. And this is part of a larger write-up that we did for our Semiconductor Insiders that you can find only at chipstockinvestor.com.
That's right, check out Semi Insider. That's where you can find all of our research and a growing number of tools to help you cut through all of the noise out there in the tech investing universe. And we've got some cool new stuff coming up later this summer. Can we call it our summer seasonal software release?
Is that a thing?
That kind of sounds like Airbnb.
Is it like a chip stock investor thing? No.
Summer release. Check it out.
Check it out. We're going to be talking about some really cool tech today. And if you recall, back last spring, we did a video on the next 15 years of semiconductor advancement. And one of the things that we talked about was CFET, which is what we're going to be talking about today.
Sort of. IBM's version of the CFET, or complementary field effect transistor, they're calling this NanoStack. This is a picture of a chip and a wafer they made using NanoStack. It's not NanoStack specifically. And this is a close-up shot of NanoStack, which is a sub 1 nanometer manufacturing process IBM is working on as part of their IP portfolio. But Casey, let's get everybody caught up before we talk about what IBM did. What exactly are we looking at here? FinFET, GAA, or gate all around? I think I got that from Asianometry some years ago. I think he said that. And CFET, what are we looking at? These little very simplified schematics.
Yeah, what are we looking at, Nick? We're looking at transistors. And this is one of the areas that they're trying to figure out how to cram more transistors so that they can scale the capabilities of these semiconductor chips.
Oh, so we're talking about Moore's Law.
We're talking about Moore's Law.
Okay.
Let's make it simple. Getting more crammed into a smaller space. And so FinFET, which is on the left side, is what we were previously on. GAA, or gate all around, is what we have transitioned to now. That's underway. And you'll notice on both FinFET and the GAA schematics there, the NFET and PFET, which are the blue and red lines that you see, are both stacked next to each other. Now, the goal of getting more transistors and therefore being able to shrink the size of these chips is to stack them on top of each other instead of side by side, which is what you see on CFET. You can think about this like creating a skyscraper versus a two-story apartment building.
Yeah, and I think you'll hear folks in the industry start to call this the 3D transistor when we start talking about actual chips being made using this manufacturing process, the CFET process. There are a lot of companies involved with this development. There's a lot of things that need to happen to be able to pull it off. First of all, you have to figure out how to do it in the first place. Once you can make a chip that has these transistors stacked on top of each other, you have to figure out how to operate it properly. Some challenges like the heat or making sure the interconnects are lined up properly. And then there's, of course, making the manufacturing process actually economically viable. So IBM is working on this. A company called IMEC in Belgium that does a lot of R&D work, especially in close collaboration with companies like ASML, is working on this. This is another slide that we took from our presentation back in March 2025. If we didn't mention it already, that video we will link in the description below if you want to get caught up on this industry R&D work on the way to the CFET and beyond. So you can see from this schematic here, IMEC looking at different ways to stack the N and P FETs on top of each other. A lot of engineering work happening right now. By the way, we reached out to IMEC to see if we could come in for a visit, and we got a sort of polite reply saying not interested.
The answer was no.
The answer was a most definite no, and there was no invitation to try again later. If you happen to work at IMEC, we'd like to visit. Otherwise, we're going to say what we want about you without you getting the chance to shape our opinion of the work that you do. We're nice people. We're trying to take the opportunity here to get educated from the source. Anyways, Casey, there's a schematic from Synopsys and IMEC. What is IBM doing
I bet you all thought that we were never going to get to IBM.
We're totally getting to IBM.
I just want to point out that IBM sold its chip manufacturing company or segment back in 2015 to GlobalFoundries. Sold.
They paid the GlobalFoundries to take it over. It was that much of a financial burden, let's just say.
So IBM was in quite the pickle, I would say, for some time. They've changed significantly. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here as we continue on. But most people know that IBM has one of the biggest IP and patent portfolios in the world, and they continue to develop more of these sorts of things. That's what they are doing best right now. Software, networking, hardware, quantum, leading edge semi research. So this is what they came up with for these CFETs, this design of CFETs.
Another schematic of the CFET on the left, like what we showed you from IMEC, also the diagram from Synopsys, where you see the NFET and the PFET directly stacked vertically. But in IBM's version, NanoStack on the right side of the diagram, you can see that the NFET and the PFET are slightly offset from each other. And they found a number of advantages, apparently, in doing this. The end result in their testing was apparently an up to 50% increase in compute performance or a 70% increase in energy efficiency compared to IBM's 2-nanometer IP that they unveiled in 2021. So maybe this is news to you. What is IBM doing with semiconductor IP development if they don't even have a semiconductor manufacturing business anymore? What gives? What's going on at IBM?
Well, that's a fantastic question that we might have an answer to. We at least have a good proposition as to why they might be getting involved in this, is because they've been missing out. IBM has actually done a really terrible job of getting in on this early. And so now they have to play a little bit of catch up. And so they want to participate in this next generation of chip design that they could eventually license out and earn royalties on.
Yeah, in addition to that, the semiconductor manufacturing supply chain, like we've been talking about for the last couple of years here at Chipstock Investor, that semiconductor manufacturing supply chain is very much going to be a very critical part of the quantum computing industry as it tries to figure out how to go fully commercial one day as well. IBM also has quantum computing systems they're working on, quantum computing IP. This would definitely be eventually complementary fields of work. But let's talk about more specifically how they want to monetize this right now. This slide taken from IBM's 2025 annual report. Yes, very much a cloud infrastructure and software business, including multiple acquisitions, Red Hat in 2019. They divested Kyndryl. They acquired HashiCorp in early 2025. And a brief little revenue, net income, and free cash flow chart on an annual basis from our research dashboard. Those acquisitions of cloud consulting and HashiCorp made up the majority of IBM's high single-digit percentage revenue growth last year. So that's the good news. They're in pretty good shape now. They've stabilized the business. And now they, because they're still profitable, have the ability to go out, invest in this new R&D, and hopefully tee up more robust, more interesting revenue growth in the future.
Here's a look at the R&D expenses IBM had in 2025. You can see that increased a bit, $8.3 billion in 2025. But the interesting thing about IBM is that they can actually monetize some of that R&D that they're doing via licensing. And that's what they have done. You can see that in the bottom chart there, intellectual property income and custom development income. So we can safely assume that any of the future financial benefit that they might get from this NanoStack technology will end up in this line item.
And it is interesting to note here that this is reported as income. So this gets directly reported into net income. If you rewind and look at that IBM revenue breakdown, you don't see a revenue line item for IP licensing or custom tech development. That's sort of embedded in the rest of the business's revenue line items. But because IP licensing is such a high profit margin business, they do report it as net income. And interestingly enough, this particular line item was nearly 10% of IBM's GAAP net income in 2025. So this NanoStack and other related semiconductor technology actually could be a pretty lucrative business for IBM over time which leads us to probably needing to talk about who exactly they're working on this with and who they're working on NanoStack for specifically.
These are the companies that IBM specifically name dropped in their report: ASML, Lam Research, Tokyo Electron, and Screen. We can call this the early NanoStack basket, if you will. You see 3 of the Fab Five. We'll talk about why it's not all of the Fab Five on this list here in just a moment. But want to point out over there on the right, we have the logo for Rapidus, which is a Japanese foundry startup. Rapidus does not have the plethora of IP that some of its foundry peers would have, like TSMC, Intel, Samsung. They have a long history of IP. And so Rapidus is kind of building this from the ground up.
Thus, they are tapping IBM for some help because they're not going to get it from their peers, competitors that you just rattled off, TSMC, Intel, or Samsung. Also, Tenstorrent, that is the startup of Jim Keller. We talked about this a couple of years ago when we did a video on Tokyo Electron, is also doing some IP development and probably going to eventually become a customer of Rapidus once it is ramped up in production starting in 2027. Some other committed customers include Fujitsu and some of the other big Japanese technology and industrial conglomerates you would expect. They're there as well, lined up as investors and future customers. Overall, though, I like you calling this an early IBM NanoStack, also maybe early Rapidus basket of stocks: ASML, Lam, Tokyo Electron, and Screen Holdings. But Casey, why exactly these 4 companies and not the typical Fab Five that we are always coming back to and talking about?
Well, as we all know, IP is one thing and design is one thing, but manufacturing the device, the chip, is a much different matter. And so that's where these 4 companies come in. And the reason it's these 4 companies, well, this chart right here. Let's point out ASML over there in the top right for starters in lithography. I think we can all agree that if you need lithography, ASML is kind of the gold standard. Lam, bottom right, leader in etch, as well as a lot of new deposition techniques. Tokyo Electron is kind of the applied materials. They're like the generalist of Japan, which is actually why Tokyo Electron and Applied Materials wanted to merge about a decade ago. Of course, that didn't happen, but Tokyo Electron continues to be a leader in all sorts of semiconductor manufacturing equipment and is based in Japan, which is also the case with Screen, which is a leader in wafer cleaning and processing. Tokyo Electron, Screen, both in Japan, and Rapidus is definitely getting a lot of backing from the Japanese government, similar to what's happening with the US and Intel. And so it makes a lot of sense to source as much as you possibly can from your own home country.
Yeah, that's right. When we had the Japan carry trade extreme volatility event some time back, we had a couple commenters calling us out on that. And then first half 2026 happened. And I think the market kind of decided Japan's revival of its semiconductor manufacturing industry is the real deal. A lot of these stocks up quite a lot. And as Rapidus nears production and nears scale up, obviously these are businesses that are historically operating on a pretty short sales cycle. The sales cycle might be lengthening a bit here. And even though a company is cyclical, doesn't mean it's not growing overall and setting higher highs and higher lows along the way. Screen in particular is interesting. It's yet another one we've never done a video with. So IBM NanoStack, also mentioned Screen Holdings here. Something more of a mid-cap player within the semiconductor manufacturing equipment and wafer fab equipment providers. Definitely one that could participate in some of the heat up in merger and acquisition activity as of late. They also made a small little investment in quantum compute, quantum networking equipment early in 2026. That's interesting too. Perhaps a topic for another time. But yeah, there you have it. IBM NanoStack, why they're doing it, and who the early beneficiaries are going to be as they supply Rapidus the much needed IP to get into the advanced semiconductor manufacturing game.
All right, that's a wrap. Make sure you check out chipstockinvestor.com, hit the subscribe button, and here's that video that we did last spring about the next 15 years of semiconductor tech. Watch it now.
Let's do one more test just to see.
Okay, we're testing again. I'm talking at my normal talking voice.
You're a little higher than your normal talking voice, which is good.
I'm talking in my YouTube voice.